So what do you think, Chris, of sit versus stand?
I think it depends on the person. I think you're in my shot right now is is pretty drastic in the difference of what someone can look like when they're sitting. So you don't have super broad shoulders or anything, but sitting down the way you are with your arms lifted and the way you're leaning.
I've got this surface in front of me, so I'm
exactly. It looks, whereas my camera's a little bit above me looking down, and I don't have broad shoulders anyway. So I look, it's a little more, it's a different feel. It's the same kind of thing, shooting up at someone versus shooting down or whatever. So that's something to be aware of when you're sitting. A stool or something like that doesn't have a place to put your arms is going to be the most, the closest to a stand. Standing can be difficult for some people. Some people fidget, like they have the shaky leg, or they sway, or they sway forward. The mom sway. And it's pretty awesome.
Is that what it's called?
I've just noticed it is because I had a young child. That, like, if you're used to holding a young child and then you're not holding a young child, all of a sudden you're swaying because you're just used to doing that lullaby because it's important to be as a young parent usually. But I think it is somewhat instinctual. You're not really aware that you're doing it. So someone that's not used to trying to stay on their mark and not fidget and that kind of thing. I mean, I have a lot of ways of dealing with that as a director or as a DP or something, is to, okay, I'm either going to, I want to, you have to feel out the content, right? So I had a guy that I interviewed for a job, and I asked him, I gave him a situation. We're doing a commercial for a heating and air place, and we're doing an interview with a lady that just loves that they cleaned her air ducts or whatever. How would you set them up? Well, what's she going to say? He said, what do you mean? What's she going to say? She's probably going to say, I loved it. He's like, well, I'd probably have her standing then, because I want her to be able to exert confidence in her standing and the way she stands and everything. I thought that was pretty good, although I was envisioning an older lady, so I imagine that more like sitting. But regardless, it was an interesting answer, and I think it's something to consider when you're asking the question, sit or stand, is what's appropriate for the content. And realize that there are drawbacks to both, and it depends on if you can handle those drawbacks. So, if you're able to open your aperture or close your aperture down so you have a deeper depth of field, the fidgeting or the wiggling and stuff is not as big of a deal. But I don't know if you can hear that. I have kids yelling in the background. Sorry. But that, if you can do that and make it so they don't look like they're fidgeting, that might be a way to fix it. But better yet would just be someone not to fidget or to be swaying or do that kind of thing. So then being connected to the ground helps that, but then you want to make sure not to have armrests or that thing to sit on.
Yep.
So
you have the armrest, really you start to like lean on it, and
I like a stool where the legs are dangling, so you have to do good posture to not fall off. I think that's helpful. It really just depends on how you're able to keep that person in place. But if you're talking about yourself, I would say just practice both ways and be able to do both either way. I'd say shooting a vlog is even a different thing, because people don't sit down to shoot a vlog typically. Well, maybe they would at a computer or something, but that there are moves where you're rotating your body while you're doing it, so the background's moving and you're staying and stable, so that there's a little bit of interest, but you're not doing too much that it's like this big old giant sway. It's just to have a little bit of movement in the background, and that's not something you'd normally have in any other type of shooting situation. So it's careful there. I think the eye line is going to be really important in this place. So where are you going to have your person looking? If you're doing interviews, it depends on really what they're doing. But if they're not talking to the audience, they don't need to look at the camera. They don't need to look right into the lens. And it's better that way a lot of times, because that can be intimidating. I know I have a hard time making eye contact all the time, not for any reason other than it's just I tend to look down when I'm thinking. And so, it can be difficult when you're forcing someone to do that if they're on the edge. But if you're talking about yourself, be comfortable with both, get used to doing them. On my computer, I have a little green light that's on right now that I'm on. That kind of gives me something to look at. But if I look a little bit over, all of a sudden I don't look like I'm looking at the lens, and that's a problem. So being careful with the eye line, with where the camera's at, to keep you there. So Mike, where he's sitting, whenever he's shooting at that A-roll spot where I shoot, I have to lower the camera because I have a longer upper body. Although Mike and I are about the same height, I must have longer leg, or a longer upper torso, and Mike's legs are longer or something. Because it's a little bit different, and it makes a significant difference in the way the shot looks if I'm at eye level or not with the camera.
Yeah. So I think I generally agree with your sentiment on sit versus stand. Is something you mentioned the last time we recorded this podcast, or didn't record. Is some people have like restless leg, and I actually count myself as in this category, where they're like shaking their leg if they're sitting down, you know. So obviously in those kinds of situations, you gotta do something else with that person, because a lot of times it's uncontrollable. But other than that, like a general rule of thumb, I would say, which you kind of already hit on with sitting, is if you need to sit or your talent needs to sit, that's fine. But don't give them any chair that has an armrest. You get these weird lean things going on. And also don't give them like a surface to lean on, like I was doing for the majority of this podcast, leaning forward like this.
I'm leaning on one. I'm just further from the camera.
Well, you know, the podcast format is very much casual in nature, but
exactly.
But you know, if you're doing something more formal, obviously you don't want them just doing what I've been doing this whole time with my hand, you know, resting on my face here, right?
Yeah, I mean, a polished production is surely going to be something you want everybody and every part of it to look their best. Right. I'm reminded of, although I don't think you've seen it yet, is the Tiger King. They have a lot of scenes. They're doing a lot of interviews. And I was just recently watching an interview with, it was actually David Spade doing an interview with one of the husbands of the show. You don't really need to know about it, but the guy is very backwoods. They're trying to typecast and characterize, put these people into character. And the producer asked him to take his shirt off. So he's shirtless during every interview. The guy's got few teeth, or in the interviews now he's got all his teeth fixed, but they were trying to get him to seem like this macho strong guy, but like, why is he the only one without a shirt on? It's really strange. But there's a lot of those things I think that they did just really to make characters because they needed to. So in that way, it's definitely not a pure documentary. There's definitely a lot of manipulation going on, but it communicates something. I mean, if you don't mind them fidgeting, if that's part of who they are, if they're being themselves or whatever, that's fine. But a lot of times you won't have enough. The format won't fit enough to explain the inner secrecies of the person to understand that they fidget. So if you're doing even a 10-minute video, it's unlikely you're going to get into the character of any given person or a presentation or yourself or whatever it is enough to understand why that person was moving weird. You just won't get it. So it's all about context in that way. But yeah, the rest of the leg, that's hard. That's like too much coffee. I get that way as like, oh man, I need to drink some water to cut this caffeine down because I'm going to either talk too fast or be just really jittery on camera, eyes shaking or moving around a lot.
The surface thing, the surface that we have in the podcast, the mothership here, the surface is like very tall compared to where the chairs are. The chairs are a little shorter,
lower.
But you do see news anchors all the time in front of a desk, the news desk, but they always sit like very tall compared to that surface. And I suspect, I don't know, Chris, I haven't spent much time in a newsroom, so maybe you tell me. I suspect it's partly so that they don't sort of lean up against it. Like when the surface is just like a little bit of above waist level, it's almost there as the thing to like hold your papers or something, but is otherwise not functional in the same way that a desk is functional, like a classic desk that you would work at.
So there's a couple things here. One, some desks they'll put an eraser on the desk and it's a belly button mark. And so they're keeping the eraser in their belly button to know their spot. And so they're arching the back, so the belly button's full of that eraser. It's really bizarre. The other is they'll have like a lumbar support in the back so that their back is arched, so they have to sit up forward. Definitely no armrests on those chairs. They definitely bring them up so that their legs are like right underneath the table. A lot of times, it's harder, if you're talking about. I think of like Kelly Ripa, who's a really small person, and Michael Strahan, who was her host. He's a really big guy, so like they'd be weird at a Danker desk together. You'd have him almost sitting on the floor. It's like almost having Shaq on any kind of interview desk. He's going to just dwarf everybody. So it's likely he's sitting on some phone books on the ground. But they do those kinds of things and have it arch. The other thing is that they go with the polite way of like no elbows on the table. So you can have wrists, you can have forearms, and that kind of thing. But as soon as you start doing elbows, you start looking different. So those are like anchoring 101, and it's usually just most anchors are trying to look good on camera at all times because in television news, at least, you jump around markets a lot. That's how you get a raise. Instead of staying one place and working really hard, you just go to a bigger market and you get a bigger paycheck. And so they're always trying to make their reel. So it's always like, if I do something really good tonight, I might have a new job 2 weeks from now. And that's awesome because that's just the game of that. The newscaster roulette or anchor roulette, I've heard it as, it's just in the way of like, all right, if you're not moving up in markets, you're either wanting to stay in one place or not get another job. We're getting way off topic here, but that's the eraser is actually really helpful. It's weird. Like the first time I heard that, really? People, they put a eraser on the desk so that it goes in there. Yeah, it's a belly button eraser. What? That's so weird. But then you're like, oh, but everybody sits up there, and if they don't, they look bad. Or we had a sportscaster that he wore too big of a suit and also had bad posture, and so he always just looked like this kid in this little suit because he didn't sit up straight, and it's odd. And I don't think he's in news anymore. So it speaks to your ability to rise up to the occasion.